All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the Leadership in Digital Collaboration Transformation panel. We've got a good group here, as you can see, from all over the KC area with broad experience, getting together just to answer a few questions and talk about their experience in moving sometimes from HTML to completely cloud-based technology, other times just doing incremental change or a complete intranet overhaul. So really just all over the place. But let's go ahead and get started with some slides here. The first one, just the way you can maximize your attendance, is to make sure you're using the question and the chat options out of the panel on either your right or left side of your screen. Our speakers will be watching those, responding to questions as we go along. Also, if we have time at the end, those questions as well. Speakers, if you can just make sure when you're not talking that your mics are muted, that'll prevent any kind of weird feedback we get. And then thank you for watching those chat and question boxes. Here are our speakers. I'm just gonna have the speakers introduce themselves. If we can start in the upper left-hand corner here with Alicia, going left to right and then going on to the second row.
Hey guys, this is Alicia Backlund from Level 5 Solutions. I play a couple different roles here, but the relevant one for today is intranet strategist.
This is Jason Dozier at the University of Kansas, and I am the Office 365 administrator here.
Hi, my name is Sharon Weaver, and I run Smarter Consulting, and I do SharePoint and Office 365 consulting.
Okay, and Mike's not able to join us, but he did respond to a question in advance, so we'll get to that a little later. We'll go ahead with Yang.
Oh, okay. I'm Yan Yan, work at University of Kansas, and I'm an IT analyst here.
Hi, I'm Chris Heeter. I work at AMC Theaters. I'm the application administrator here, and what's relevant is that I do the SharePoint on-prem stuff here.
Okay, and Starla's not with us either, so we'll just keep going with Rebekah.
Hi, I'm Rebekah Ellingson from AMC Theaters. I am the communications manager, and this year we launched, along with Chris's help and also Level 5 Solutions, we launched a new intranet for our employees.
Great, well, thank you all for being with us. Let's go ahead with some questions here. Oh, just kidding. Let's go over some structure. So the way this is going to work, just so attendees know, is that I do have questions prepared in advance, some from registrations, others just in general from what I know of the speakers. So even though a question may be directed towards a specific speaker or company, any of the speakers or panelists can jump in at any time to contribute their own experience for those as well. So any questions that are left unanswered at the end in the question panel or the chat, I'll make sure we get an answer to those from our speakers. And that'll be posted in a transcript later on. The recording of this panel will also be available later. All right, so our first question goes to Alicia here, and it's up on the screen. We've got tools are the only, are only part of the challenge, sorry about that, when making the change to the latest collaborative technologies. What tips do you have for leaders looking to improve the digital competence of the workforce?
Sorry, I had to find my mute button. Excuse me. Okay, well, technology is great, and I'm a big fan, obviously. But intranets and digital workspaces and employee collaboration are for human beings, and thus they should be run by human beings. And so my biggest tip for leadership, excuse me, is recognize that it's a specialty. It's a thing that you have to hire for, you have to pay for, and you have to empower, not just give people responsibility, but empower them to make decisions about the strategy of your digital collaboration, your digital workplace, et cetera. And I'm not talking about hiring one SharePoint admin and expecting that poor person to do everything from, you know, user permission management to defining strategy. That's not fair. So I think, to me, the biggest tip is recognize that it is a strategic specialty and respect it accordingly.
All right, thank you. Any other panelists want to jump in on how you can improve digital competence of the workforce?
Yeah, this is Jason Dozier at KU. One thing I would say, which I pretty much goes along with what she already said, but is you really have to kind of quit viewing your users or your end users as not being competent. I think there's a real trend in IT to look at people and say, well, they're not going to be able to handle this change. They're not going to want to do this. People aren't going to learn new things. And you really need to kind of get out of that mentality, and you will get good users if you give them the opportunities and give them access to the tools and give them the ability to use these things. You're going to find a lot of people are going to step up and really develop and run with it. So you've got to give them the opportunity and not hold them back so much. And that's, I think as IT people, we have this tendency to want to clamp down and really letting them loose with some of this. You have to have some governance and some guidance, but give them the chance to use the tools, and I think you'll be surprised what they can do with it.
Yeah, to kind of add to, this is Chris, to kind of add what Jason was saying, just a little bit of extra help with a user, just like giving them a little something they can do instead of you taking on all the work. It really helps the users feel like they are a part of the environment and they're actually helping too. And it takes some of the work off of your plate so you can actually do some of the more technologically advanced stuff.
All right, that's great. And just out of curiosity, what kind of, just so our attendees can kind of get a grasp of the organizations you're with, what kind of education departments or programs do you have that assist you either in IT or outside of IT to do these kind of trainings and things to help improve digital competence for those that do need it?
Hey Nate, it's Rebekah at AMC Theaters. We do have a learning and development group here. I don't know that they do a lot as far as training for use on our digital side. So I would say that a lot of our digital work that we're training people on is actually when they have issues and when they're contacting SharePoint administrators for help, or when they contact me as the kind of the central person for our intranet. And then we have some how-to guides, and we have developed trainings for using the intranet with the help of learning and development, but that was something that we led instead of it being pushed through learning and development.
Yeah, and this is Sharon. I think a big thing, I probably spend about 50% of my time doing training. I do some classes at JUCO, and I've done a lot of private training for corporations. And I think that's exactly, they need somebody to come in and kind of give them either a refresher or some overviews on how they can do things better, or maybe something that they didn't know before, especially with so much new technology coming on. So I know that a lot of companies are either bringing in somebody or sending their people out to an education facility of some sort where they're getting some basic training on some things. In addition to that, I see a lot of people coming out that are not paid by their employer when I do like SharePoint classes and Office 365 classes, where people are coming and spending, a couple $100 of their own money so that they can learn, so that when they go back to work, they feel more competent in using that new technology.
Okay, and it looks like there's a question from Donna in the question panel here for Rebekah. She's wondering which platform you used for your intranet.
Yeah, I think that probably Chris is a better person to talk about anything when it comes to technology, but I'll start and Chris can jump in if I'm incorrect, because we were on SharePoint 2010, and with our internet upgrade, we moved to SharePoint 2016, and it's on-prem, not on cloud.
All right, let's keep going here to question number 2. So this one's for Jason, but again, anyone can jump in. Office 365 can be challenging when there are constant updates and you're not always able to anticipate sometimes the volume of those updates or how important they are, and some aren't relevant to some end users at all. So how do you filter some of those upcoming changes and updates and communicate those to end users when you have a large organization like KU?
Yeah, and this is probably one of the biggest challenges we have, because the way that updates come out, you get some kind of notice generally that they're going to come out, but you don't have specific dates and times. It's like you will see this sometime in the next 6 weeks, sometime by the end of the year. And so you don't always know when those updates are going to hit. And so one of the best things you can do is to enable your organization. You can set up people to be preview users that will actually, some of the users in your organization will get those updates before others. And you need to have a committed group of people that you work with that are in there a lot and used to looking for those changes and communicate those back to you. So that's one of the first things, just so you see these coming. The other thing we do is, we try to limit by whatever controls, and it varies from application to application. We do try to limit who can get into those applications when they are first launched. We usually do that through licensing now. That's the way Microsoft seems to be going, is that you disable the licenses and don't assign them to people who don't want to have it. And we always try to do this in some kind of a pilot type application. We identify some power users, people we know can work with us on these things, and we let them start using it first and get the feedback from them, and hopefully that way we can anticipate problems, because there's always things that are going to come up. You look at an application and you say, well, that's not going to be a big problem. That's a simple thing. We'll let people use it. And then it kind of takes off beyond what you expect. And now you have a support issue maintaining it and trying to identify those things that are going to make it sustainable in the enterprise, and how you're going to manage it. And that's usually what it comes down to more often than not, is not how people are going to use it so much, because once again, those tools are out there and people will find a lot of great ways to use them, but how as an organization you can keep that sane, because you're really moving from that IT-centric to a user-centric thing, where users are just kind of going to be doing this stuff and they don't need you to enable it for them so much. And you've really got to keep an eye on how you're going to manage that and how you're going to keep it organized, sustainable, and not let it get so out of hand that it becomes kind of a beast that collapses under its own weight. That probably varied off the topic a little bit, but those are kind of the challenges you face with the kind of update schedule that's always there. And mostly it just really comes down to identifying how comfortable you are with change in your organization, how quickly you're going to roll those out. Because no matter how much you try to limit this, it seems like Microsoft is moving more and more to the idea that the power is in the hand of the users, and as IT, we can just be kind of guides and teachers and help people along. It's not really up to us to control. And what I found is the more we resist these changes, the more you try to shut things down, the more you try to limit them, the more problems you have managing things down the road, as Microsoft kind of keeps moving the goalpost on you. So really just look at communicating those things, check your message center to make sure you know what's coming up, do those preview users so you see those changes before they hit everybody and you have a little bit of time to work with them, and do some limited time pilots, but the long-term goal should be opening them up and not trying to turn features off forever, because things become more and more integrated and you want to give people those tools and you want the whole suite to work together. So really have a look towards the long term of making those tools available to everybody, and just limit them initially till you have a chance to understand how to manage it and what the impact is.
Yeah, you make a good point, Jason. A lot of those Office 365 things are better together, but even on-prem, I'm at LMH Health and we have SharePoint 2016, and we're finding that even then, before you get to Office 365, there are pieces that, for example, if you turn off OneDrive for Business, you lose a lot of the potential of the tool of SharePoint, which leads to a lack of user adoption, because there are features that they may know could be possible that we haven't enabled because we haven't opened up that one piece that we're not ready to administer yet.
Yeah, that is a scenario we run into a lot, and in our particular environment, like one of our big problems is our Exchange is still on premise and our Skype is still on premise, and that is a very limiting factor because we don't have all of those features that depend on Outlook, being part of your Office 365 environment. And more as Skype transitions to Teams, we're going to run into those same kind of problems. So I'm really kind of an all or nothing type of person on this, and my views with it, that you really need to embrace the whole suite, all the tools they offer, and enable and use as many of those things, because that's when you get the real benefit of this. If you just do it piecemeal, I think people will get frustrated with it and they won't see the real value, and or maybe they'll understand the real value and then you're the enemy because you're not letting them use it.
Absolutely. Are there any other panelists who want to jump in on this one before we move on? All right, let's keep going. We've got question number 3 here for Sharon. How can a leader utilize digital collaboration tools to improve workplace communication and team cohesion? As a consultant, and this is kind of a two-parter, so the second part, as a consultant, what challenges have you run into when it comes to implementing new solutions for the first time?
So I thought about this one for a while. Nothing like giving me the hard question, right? So for the first one, in terms of using digital collaboration tools for improving communication, this has been something I've worked with for a long time in terms of collaboration. And I think one of the big things, I know this has been mentioned before, but it is to not think about this so much as what tools can we shove down people's throats, but how can we actually improve the day-to-day interaction of people. And you have to start with things like, what are people's communication styles and how do they best work with each other. And one of my things that I've been really excited about that's coming out is things like Teams, because there's multiple ways that you can communicate with each other through a tool like that. If you're somebody who likes to sit at your desk and chat with somebody, it's got the chat feature. If it's something where you want to work in a private group, you can set that up. If you want to get on a call with somebody, you can talk to them verbally. If you want to get on a video chat, you can sit and see them face to face. If you want to send a file, you can send a file. And so I think a lot of it is really just understanding how people communicate, what those communication styles are, and then using the technology to enhance that, as opposed to just saying we have all these new collaboration tools and now you're going to use them. Do you want me to go ahead and answer the second one, or do you want to leave that open for some other people?
Well, sure, yeah. Are there other panelists who have ideas on how some of these tools could improve teamwork or collaboration?
I don't have any brilliant ideas, but I know it's difficult. I mean, I've seen client after client implement tools, and especially Microsoft tools, and have their workforce go, oh, if only we had something that would let us do this. It's like, well, you do, and it's called Skype for Business, or it's called Teams, or it's called this. I'm not sure where the disconnect is, but sometimes there just seems to be a big gulf between people understanding what those tools can do and actually implementing them versus the tools just sort of sitting there waiting to be used. I wish I could crack the code on that because it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, this is Jason at KU, and I definitely agree with that. Even like among our internal Microsoft support group, it's hard to get people sometimes to adopt to like Teams. Everybody's so entrenched in using email. But that being said, Skype, we've replaced our entire phone system, or most of our phone system, with Skype for Business, and it's pretty much mandatory for people to use. So sometimes it's going to take a little bit of heavy-handedness from above to say this is the tool you will use, and you're going to have to communicate in that. If you don't have that kind of institutional will, then it's really hard, but you just have to find those use cases that makes things where people get it, where it's like, wow, this is so much better and easier in the way we've done it in the past. And that's difficult to do, but we do find little victories here and there. And it doesn't happen as quickly as I'd like in a lot of cases, but you do find those really enthusiastic users that see the utility and will start using it, and hopefully that enthusiasm will spread.
I think a lot of that just goes back to training and user adoption.
It would also help me a lot if the names, I mean, I know technology has to evolve, but going from my site to Delft, from this to that, and it's like I can't even keep straight. And there's a little bit of overlap in each, and just trying to sort out which tool is for what and what its name is this year can be a challenge. And I don't mean to sound like a hater, because I'm not. The tools are very useful, but I think it's a logistical challenge for people to keep straight in their heads what's that thing called that's supposed to do this, especially when Microsoft is good at giving things plain language names, which I am in favor of for sure. But something called Teams, well, that's a very all-encompassing word. Well, what exactly does that do? It's hard. I don't envy them the challenge, but I also know that it's a challenge on the end user side as well.
I personally think Link, Skype, Teams for Business is an awesome product, though.
Communicator.
Love it.
It is. All right, so for the second question, sorry, you ready?
Oh, yep. Let's go ahead and go with that second one.
Okay. So as far as challenges for implementing solutions, honestly, I think that the biggest thing that I run into is around change management. And I mean, that's going to be kind of universal, no matter kind of what position you're in or where you're at. But as a consultant, it's almost even more difficult because you don't have a history with those people many times. Maybe you know somebody there, but you don't know the whole team. You don't have any of the kind of tribal experiences and tribal knowledge that some of those people have been through. And I know a lot of times people bring consultants in for that perspective because they want somebody who isn't the same, who doesn't do it just because it's always been done that way. But I think when you try to come in and implement new solutions, a lot of times the big thing that I try to do is really get to know my clients and build relationships with them, because when I come in, a lot of times the reason why they need something is because they've got this pain point and they're unwilling or unable to solve it on their own. But at the same time, you don't want to come in and try to just push something at them that they don't understand. So I end up spending a lot of time really kind of getting to know them, understanding what their culture is, figuring out what their change management style is, and then slowly helping them to go from where it is that they are to where they want to be, so that when you do implement that new solution, it has the highest possible chance of success.
Hi, Sharon. It's Rebekah from AMC. I just wanted to say that's such a good answer, and I think that's one of the reasons that you're a wonderful consultant. And I wanted to share an example from another wonderful agency, and that was Level 5 Solutions that helped us with our intranet upgrade. And what they did is very much along lines of what you're saying as a best practice for you, is that when they had to introduce something brand new for our company, they approached it by really jumping in and using the words we use and the way we communicate to help communicate that change as well. So for instance, whenever we actually shut down our internet and put a freeze on it, so all of our communications around that and everything that Level 5 had designed for us related to movies. Which is how we communicate at AMC. We're always trying to look for like a tie-in to a movie as our theme. So when we did that, it was an engaging way to communicate. And like I said, we were using the words that we use when we communicate at AMC. So people felt like it was something interesting and something familiar.
That's great.
All right. Any other input on that second part there about challenges running into and implementing brand new solutions?
I just want to admit to Rebekah that it was way more easy to talk about movies than it is to talk about some of our other clients' products. Not that I don't love our other clients, but movies are just like way more fun than software as a service. So made it a lot easier.
All right, so let's go to our next one here. We've got Mike Broadwell, who wasn't able to join us, but he did answer in advance for us. So we might be able to have some discussion around this one. I worked with Mike at KU libraries, and they started with a 100% HTML intranet, and they had to leap, or it felt like a leap, to Office 365, which with it introduced automation capabilities and all these different tools that we've been discussing that kind of work together as a suite. So it was a whole new way of working online together. So I asked Mike what recommendations he might have for other leaders maybe going through a similar leap where it feels like you're walking upstairs, but you're skipping a few. And here's his response. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you. You have the slides, and there'll be a transcript later, but I am going to go down to the recommendations there because I think they're great. Patience on all ends, admin expectations. So Jason kind of mentioned that earlier, where you've got to have that executive buy-in. Developers laying the track as the train goes, and users slowly adopting to change. And I thought that was interesting to think about the speed of adoption too. We don't often talk about that. It's usually just user adoption. But sometimes that speed depends on your workforce. And if you have an older workforce, younger workforce, more tech savvy workforce, a local workforce, or one that's mostly remote, like there are a lot of factors that go into that. And of course, we're working with humans, so there's so many sides to that. And then champions are critical. So it'd be interesting to hear if any of your organizations are using like a ninja program, champions, and those kind of things can fade away. But how do you keep them going and keep the excitement up? So I'll hand that over, let everybody look at the screen, and any panelists that want to jump in there.
Hi, it's Rebekah and Chris from AMC, and Chris just nudged me and said that we should say something about working with champions. That's something that within AMC we rolled out whenever we relaunched the intranet. So we had a champion from every business unit who I think we kind of voluntold them that they would be champions. And actually,
Did you say voluntold?
Yeah, we did.
That's awesome.
It was great. They had in some way been engaged in our intranet in the past, so maybe they uploaded a document or updated their team description. And so we said, hey, you're the contact we have for your department, and then just didn't take no for an answer. And then they were actually really engaged for people who didn't volunteer for the tasks themselves, and they helped us they helped us, but we also engaged them as a thank you and let them preview the site in advance and gave them lots of goodies and parties so that we could make sure that they felt appreciated for their role. But they performed our content cleanup, helped train their team members on if they had questions, and really were just our champions throughout the whole process and continue to be now that we have a governance committee.
And this is Sharon. I was actually going to mention, it's really interesting that this question came up because I had lunch with my old boss from Black and Beach today. And one of the things that we implemented, because when I got there, they were on HTML and they had some SharePoint 2003 originally, and we migrated them over to SharePoint 2010 at that time. And one of the things that we did was we implemented a champion program where we did exactly the same thing. We voluntold people, one person from every division came in and did that exact same thing. And it's really interesting because I've been gone from there for 5 years now. And we did that program about 7 years ago. And I was chatting with him today, and he said that several of those original champion members have now taken on leadership opportunities in the content collaboration space, in the Microsoft application space. And they have that training and that history of being able to participate, but they have kept a lot of those changes going and a lot of that interest going within the organization, where I think if we had not had that program, those people may have never even been involved in it. So not only did it provide user adoption and growth and all of that type of thing, but it also set those people up for future opportunities to advance within either the organization or within their fields. So just some kind of neat follow-up down the road.
And I kind of thought that someone mentioned governance. I thought that was interesting too, thinking about, in Mike's situation here, leaping, a significant gap. How does governance play into it? Because champions, sure, we can get enthusiasm going, we can get people to kind of spread throughout the organization and help with that adoption piece. But what role does governance play when you have a significant gap between where you are and where you're headed?
Well, I think this is Jason from KU again. I think governance is really a huge thing that's tends to fall by the wayside a lot. People don't always think about this going forward. They just see all these neat tools and let's start using them. So governance is very important. You really do kind of have to have a plan of how you want people to use this and how you're going to manage it. And if I can, since we worked together here at KU for a while, I'm going to throw Nate under the bus just a little bit on this one, because Nate was this hugely enthusiastic champion that dived into this and did things with it beyond what anybody else at KU was doing. And that was really wonderful because it really showed the ability and really showed the power and what all could be done with it. But then Nate left to go somewhere else, and the people kind of left behind didn't have the same skill set. There was nobody here with the skill set and the bandwidth to really take over in the same way that Nate had done. So that's a real big thing when you're kind of making these plans. You have the governance is to ensure that you have backups on these things, to ensure that you have more than one person that can handle these issues, that can maintain things. And there's a lot we're finding, even now, we're finding certain things within Office 365, such as some of the old 2013 workflows, that when the person who created them, their account goes away from your system, those workflows start having issues. You see that now with forms and flows, and you really have to have some consideration for using things like service accounts or group forms or sharing those flows and workloads with other people, because you really need to have that governance and the vision to ensure that you're doing this in a sustainable way, that we're not building kind of a house of cards that all revolved around one person. And I'm not trying to be negative towards Nate in any way, because where SharePoint has gone and where Office 365, we have a lot to thank him for, because he really did do a lot of wonderful things with it. But it was a problem, like I said, when that person leaves, you've got to make sure you've got your ducks in the row and that can all transfer smoothly to another person in your organization.
And that's a really great point. And that's something, I even struggle with still in my new position. When you have a smaller organization, and I'd be interested to hear, Rebekah and Chris having an international company like you guys do, how this might differ. But being from a smaller organization or a smaller community, how does that work when someone else mentioned, I think when you have one person, I think it was Alicia, who you wouldn't wish that on, how do you deal with having one person, and what kind of documentation expectations do you have? And then even now, when I do documentation, it's outdated, maybe a month later or so. So those are some of the challenges I've run into, and I think I'll just continue to run into for at least 10 years.
I think the biggest thing that governance can be used as a tool for is allowing your users to be able to take control of their own environment and having the rules of engagement, without a better term, of how they can take control of their own environment. Especially in an organization as big as ours, it's almost impossible to be able to go and look at every single page, every single library list, and make sure everybody's treating it correctly. So you've really got to, the way that governance helps is letting people take control of their environment and know what they can and can't do. And I mean, if we've had people in the past create custom things that can't go forward, and that presents problems in the future for upgrades.
And it's Rebekah, I just wanted to add on to that, because Chris is so right. People really pushed back when we said that we were going to implement governance, but actually, we've seen so few issues now that governance actually is implemented. So they're out there able to make the changes that they need to the pages and do what they are allowed and have responsibility to do in the governance. And I would also say that in many ways gives them the tools they need to look at other communications avenues as well. So if they have content that's not a fit for our intranet, then we can say, like, okay, per governance, I can't help you with this request as you've submitted it, but have you considered using some of these other tools that we have available, like a work site, or we call it collaboration, which I'm trying to think of how to explain it a little bit more, but it's like off our intranet. It's kind of where the work gets done on SharePoint. So we're able to give them solutions that better fit their need as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. Let's go on to number 5 here. This one's for Yang at KU. You work with many different departments. So as a business analyst there at KU, how do you stay organized with multiple projects simultaneously? And how do you keep your clients updated on the status of all those projects while you're working with them?
Well, since SharePoint is just a tool KUIT provided to the campus, it's not mandatory. So not every department or everybody is using it. That's, it's not too hard for me to organize the projects. Then I normally have like not more than 2 or 3 projects at the same time. So, but one thing will be really helpful to organize is documentation. Good documentation will, help me pick up projects, very fast. And also, most of my project is help people, my users doing flow. So just use flow. They need use flow to move like forms, data files around. After I got the requirement, I just like build the flow, and then after that, I reach out to them and show them how it worked. Most people don't care about how I build the workflow as long as it worked. But somebody really like to know how to build workflow that, that way they know they can control, they can update it, or, maintains the flow. So in that case, I need to, teach them or show them how to work with the flow. So basically, since the email is now on cloud, so we're not, a lot of people don't use SharePoint yet. Later on, after email is on cloud, maybe we get a lot more projects going on.
I had to laugh when you mentioned somebody didn't really care about like how you built it or something, because that's something we run into, especially me. Like I get so excited about automation or building something really cool and it's super complex, but to an end user, they just care about that end functioning result. And so sometimes if you do try to explain the flow or how it works or what is conditional about it, their eyes will glaze over, or they'll get even more confused about something that's really simple on their side of it. So that's an interesting point. And then I'm curious, Yang, with something like Microsoft Flow, being relatively new to how we work every day, Flow, as I understand it, is just geared more towards end users being able to build their own automation. Have you had any experience with people, as an end user saying, oh yeah, I know what Flow is, or is it still kind of something that mostly IT is doing for end users?
Actually, right now, we normally build the flow for most our users. Some users like to build themselves, but since we haven't opened up flow to everybody on campus, so not many people using it right now.
And is that kind of the experience of other people too?
Nathan, your voice is cutting.
Oops, sorry about that. I was just wondering, are there other people who might have a similar experience where flow is available, but it's not necessarily, and same with Power Apps and Flow together. Are you having any luck with getting those out to end users?
Right, not many people use Flow actually. A lot of people maybe just don't know. I mean, they can use Flow.
Right. This is Jason. I was going to add to that. One of the reasons we haven't really advertised it, and we haven't been turning those on by default for everybody, so not everybody sees them. We're kind of waiting for people to come to us and ask for it, because right now there's a lot of support issues with that. If one of the things we talked about, like if people build very complicated flows that do a lot of things in their department, then they leave. You've got a problem then, because that flow is theirs. And unless you have certain license levels, this comes back to one of my constant complaints about Office 365 is Microsoft puts a lot of features out there to the end users. And then it's like, but if you want to be able to really manage this in a meaningful way, you have to pay more to get a higher level license. And that's definitely true of Flow and Power Apps. So we're wanting a chance to kind of talk to people and give them some caution and some guidance on how they use it. And we don't want a mass adoption of it yet. We're kind of waiting for those power users that see it and want to play with it to come to us, and we have a chance to have the discussion with them. And one of the things we really try to do is make them understand those things about who this flow belongs to and how it's accessed, and do things like, share it with a service account or an admin account we have. So if they leave, we still have the ability to get in there, because at the basic license level that comes with just Flow in Office 365, we don't really have any insight or any ability to see what flows are out there running in our environment or to get into those and do anything. So, unless we know people are making them out there and they are sharing them with us, we can't really see what they're doing or have any control over it when something goes wrong. So that kind of comes back to the governance portion of it too. We're really trying to work with our users and educate them and let them know here's some potential pitfalls and help them avoid those problems.
All right, thank you. Let's go to number 6 here. So this one's for Chris. What challenges as a SharePoint administrator and wizard did you have to anticipate in rolling out a new intranet to a large international company?
Yeah, so so some of the problems that we really had to anticipate were compatibility issues. We were moving from 2010 SharePoint on-prem to 2016, and when we first started, we contracted out Microsoft to do it for us, and that didn't work out so well. We ended up having to kind of piggyback it into 2013 and then into 2016 to get it there. And a lot of any customized stuff in 2010 didn't work. Databases worked almost completely different from 2010 to 2013. So there was a lot of stuff that we kind of just had to gently get to where it needed to be. And a big thing that we had is we completely changed the way people used the front page with level 5's help, like Alicia. Our front page on what we called Clipboard was basically a link farm, and we've changed it into a better place to really communicate with our company. And then we changed what was also Clipboard then into a collaboration space where people can go in, and there's really a separation between communication and collaboration now, which I think helps end users really know what they are supposed to do in the space.
I agree.
Awesome, thank you. Did you have any challenges? So it sounds like they're kind of going back and forth between 2010, 2016, 2013. That hopping around was a challenge. Did you have any issues with language issues, like compatibility? Like, were there any translation issues?
We only offer our intranet, it's Rebekah, jumping in for Chris. We only offer our intranet in English, even though we're an international company and we do have theaters all over the world. The theaters that we operate outside of the US are operated as wholly owned subsidiaries. So our intranet is actually only accessible for those associates in the US, and then just a small handful of some of our counterparts in Europe.
Okay, gotcha. Anyone else want to jump in on some of those challenges you might run into when you're rolling out a new intranet?
Well, I would, but we only have 14 minutes left, and that's about a 3-hour conversation. So I'll spare you guys.
Yeah. All right, so let's keep going. See how far we can get here. And we can always come back if we somehow end up with more time. This next one was for Starla, who's not with us, but she did text me some comments. She's traveling today. But healthcare organizations, a lot like government organizations, have a lot of considerations that make going 100% cloud or Office 365 not so feasible. So I asked what measures or considerations LMH had to think about to be able to stay up to date and relevant with technology, but also still remaining compliant and protecting all kinds of data. And so a couple of things she mentioned were training. So of course, you want to make sure your users understand, even if you do go to the cloud and they have these new capabilities with, like Ying was mentioning, Flow, and like Jason mentioned, there's no way to administer that. So for example, if someone builds a flow that sends patient information to a Gmail address outside the organization, Jason doesn't have a way to see that that was built or what's happening or monitoring that or even help to troubleshoot that. And so that's something, just training users that if you do have these tools, this is the kind of risk you're taking when you're working with this kind of sensitive data. And then another one she has here is BAAs. So just if there is a breach of data, who is responsible? And oftentimes, as I understand it, Microsoft's not going to sign over 100% and take all that responsibility if there is a breach. So part of that's training your users, making sure that data is being kept safe, but there's always that potential that something could get out. And then HIPAA compliance, and let's see, having a secure infrastructure to protect a hybrid infrastructure. So does anybody else, I'm not sure if you guys have the same kind of issues in your industries. I know education has some interesting stuff. And I'm sure Sharon, Alicia, even in your consulting, you might have run into some of these issues.
Yeah, I've got another client that has exactly your issues at Lawrence. And I'm actually, I know that one of the things that Microsoft has done is they've created basically a BAA that is kind of a standardized BAA. They're also adding a lot of that data ownership rights into their terms and conditions. And they're changing the way that that all works. That's something I've been researching a lot. I actually may follow up with Starla to chat about that because that's kind of a big deal. Most healthcare clients have that concern.
All right, let's keep going here to number 8. So this one's for Rebekah and Chris. AMC Theaters have many staff who are not full-time, so thinking about those frontline workers, part-time, not often at a computer, how do you make sure you can include those and provide resources or even engage them in social activities through your intranet?
Hey, it's Rebekah. I think I probably have more of the answer than Chris does, but I will let him jump in as he wants to contribute. But I would say that our intranet itself is open to our home office associates and then our managers within a theater. And from there, our managers curate the content for their own staff, the crew members, and they create some printable newsletters. And some of our stories actually come with a print version so that they can print them and put them on bulletin boards throughout the building. We do conduct some interviews. We call them like a 10-question interview with associates throughout the company. And for those, we actually include our crew members or those hourly employees. We interview them, they're paid during that time, and then we ask their managers to share any other comments that are left on the story with the associate. So we try to give managers the tools to cascade information as relevant to their teams.
That's really cool. And I think something other organizations do too is they'll have like a kiosk screen that they put up, and it'll show just like running headlines or something from the news. Do you have any experience with those?
Well, we actually don't have experience with that, but we have used, we actually trialed Workplace by Facebook with the intention to roll that out via app to all of our hourly associates. We didn't get the funding to do it for 2019, but it's still something we'll consider in future years, or maybe we'll have a really great box office in 2019 and we'll get funding back. But that would probably be more of our approach, because our content that we communicate internally is really meant for that manager and home office audience. We don't currently have a team that would help with, that would curate content for a crew level audience. So what they're using, what the, I don't want to go on too much, but I'd be happy to connect offline if anyone wanted to. But what we see is that the crew members, what they're wanting to communicate is more like shift trades or local theater-wide birthdays or anniversaries and that type of news, not the type of news that we're sharing on our intranet, which is much more relevant to associates that are with the company longer than 2 or 3 months.
Okay, very cool. And I see the next question here is for you also, Rebekah, but we kind of addressed it earlier with international issues that come with languages and such, but then also that engagement piece, thinking about like games, incentives, et cetera, how you get that social element in there. Do you have anything you want to add to that one?
I will just say that AMC, like Alicia said, it's a really fun company. So we try to implement that in our communications as well. We use a lot of movie themes. We do, I don't know that we have a lot of games, but we do have a polling feature on our intranet that, gosh, almost, I would say 2/3 of the internet users respond to the poll every week when we update it. We have a lot of engagement on our intranet. It's our primary method of communications, and people check it all the time. So it's something that we just try to keep upbeat and fun and tied to our industry.
Very cool, thank you. All right, question 10 here for Alicia. Why is content strategy and management important? So now we're kind of thinking outside the realm of technology. And then the big question that I'm sure everybody hears a lot is, can't intelligent search and AI bots fix all of our problems without us having to do any heavy lifting?
I really wish those AI bots would come along, because I'm so waiting for them. But unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for me, content is still very, very much a human thing. And content strategy and management are important, because content is not only tactical and practical and logistic, it's also political and emotional and scary. I'm amazed time and time again how much of a content strategist's job is therapy and going in and helping people in the enterprise understand and get them to trust you with their content, get them to understand that you've got to have a method to your madness and a why to why you've created a page, why you've written a story. And then you've got to make it, it needs care and feeding. It's got to go on forever. It's never going to stop. And so that human element of content strategy, and like I said, just the emotional attachment we have to our content is just, I just don't think it's ever going to go away, no matter what.
I think that's really interesting, especially when you mentioned that emotional piece. Like often we just think we've got to get that newsletter out, send it, and we're done. But there is that human piece of it that I don't really think about that often. I
always tell people that a lot of my job, especially as a consultant, is to go in and tell people that it's going to be okay, because it really is. I mean, we've done this lots of times, and it's going to be fine. And if you need something and we accidentally got rid of it, we will find it. And the flip side of that is helping people get the resources they need to create content where it doesn't exist. Because internally and with internal communications and workforce tools, they tend to be neglected. They tend to not get funded, like Rebekah said. And you've really got to go in and carry the flag for all those people who are trying to do a real job, in addition to creating that web content, which it's an underappreciated role and an underappreciated art form. So I try to do a little bit of both, acknowledge how difficult it is to create stuff where nothing exists when you already have a million things to do, and then to give the green light to delete something that's been hanging out for 10 years, but nobody wants to get rid of it. So it's if you can show me an AI bot who would do that, I will, sign me up.
That sounds good. I'll keep my ears open for that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so our last question here is for Jason and Yang. We just have a couple minutes. So who should IT departments, you're both from KUIT, be working with to make sure users are best equipped to maximize new technologies? And the thought that came to mind at first was the introduction of Microsoft Teams as a replacement of Skype for Business. So you get that news, what happens next?
Boy, a couple of minutes. I'm too long-winded for that. But basically, you have to have those champions. That's something that's been said over and over again by several people on this panel. And you need to reach out to those people that are willing to embrace change and get them to adopt this new technology as quickly as possible. So you have people out there that are using it and are enthusiastic, and their coworkers can see it. We also have a bit of a training department here and a client consulting group. So internally, we're going to work with those guys to say, hey, here's what we have, identify places across campus that this can benefit people, where this can solve a problem that somebody has, because those are the people that are generally really in touch with the people out there and seeing the problems and the challenges they're facing every day, and bringing them up to speed and letting them know what's available, because they're going to be able to see those places where this puzzle piece fits and say, hey, the guys over here in the School of Finance or whatever had a problem that this perfectly solves, so let's go talk to them and get them using it. Once again, we're transitioning our roles to be guides and educators and facilitators much more than we are controlling things anymore. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Yang, or disagree with me.
Oh, I'm okay with your answer.
Okay.
All right, so we did get one audience question during registration, and then it was from Donna, who couldn't stick around the whole time, but she was wondering if anybody had anything else they wanted to share about Office 365 SharePoint modern sites being used for intranet.
What specifically? There's so much issues about modern sites, so many questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, curious if she's talking about like communication sites and hub sites, or if we're still talking about maybe like more of a classic versus modern approach. So it's pretty vague.
Yeah, I think my only commentary on modern sites is just that it's rapidly evolving, and I know I'm working with a group that's currently architecting for next year, and they want to use modern sites for everything, and it's fantastic. But I just keep having to remind them that they're blazing the trail, and that modern sites are super cool, and there's a lot of really neat new features with them, but that whenever you're the pioneer in something, you have to be aware that change is going to happen rapidly. Things may not stay the way that they are right now. You're going to have to basically have a really high tolerance for change, because as Microsoft kind of moves forward with the roadmap on the modern sites, a lot of things are going to give and take and grow and change over the next year as they get everything to work together. As opposed to things that we've known for years and years and years with SharePoint on-prem, where, you use those classic sites and you know what to expect, and they may change a little bit, but, you're not seeing the rapid and expansive change that you're seeing in modern sites. Other than that, they all have great new features, and they're really neat, and the hub sites are fantastic. And it's just a matter of being really careful about your architecture and making sure you're using it for what it's designed for, and not trying to use it just to use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to say, this is Jason at KU, and with what Sharon just said there, it does make me wonder, because right now we have modern sites. In 5 years, are we going to have ultra modern sites? We're going to have future sites. But yeah, there's going to be a change, and eventually what we have now will probably look old and jaded. And the other part of what she said too is, yes, use this the way it's intended. They have a very definite structure in mind when they're using hub sites and modern sites, and they're really kind of flattening and simplifying everything, trying to keep you from going 7 layers deep with subsites, and they're trying to really flatten and simplify that architecture and the permissions model behind it. So really pay attention to those things, and as much as possible stick to the way Microsoft is wanting you to use this, which admittedly quite often doesn't match anybody's reality. But if quit trying to hammer that square peg into a round hole, and realize that this may not be the solution for everything, and if it doesn't fit your needs and doesn't fit your organization, you might want to look at something else. But pay attention to those things, and try to keep it as simple as possible.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for your time. I think some of these questions were really great, and it was good to have that discussion with all of you. It's really interesting to hear all of your different experiences and perspectives. And I hope I can have some of you again for future presentations, and have a great weekend.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thanks, Nate. You too.